Mr. Chair, you are live.
Thank you and welcome to everybody to the 21 March 2022 meeting of the Annapolis Transportation Board. We're happy to convene in spring weather and welcome Alderwoman Rhonda Pintel-Charles, who also just joined us. I will plunge directly into the agenda. The first is the call to order, which I'm doing now, and Tara Ashmore is our secretary. And if it's all right with everybody, we'll dispense with a formal calling of the roll because we are clearly evident as photographs on the screen. So she can keep track of who was here and who was not. But I will take a motion for approval of the agenda as distributed earlier.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll give a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we have an agenda which I shall now follow. The minutes kindly prepared by Tara Ashmore were distributed to you yesterday, and I hope you've had a chance to peek at them. I will take a motion to approve the minutes as written, or and we can have any discussion of modifications that may be necessary.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thanks so much. I have no items for public participation. We did have one inquiry from the public, which we will get to later in the meeting tonight. But for the moment, I would like to turn to Dr. Dua. If Kwaku is on, I've placed him in a different place on the agenda today for a reason I think that makes sense. It has been our custom in prior meetings of the Transportation Board and in this one to put the input from the Transportation Board last on the agenda. And I've been thinking about this and it doesn't make a lot of sense. The reason I first had this thought when it was the last meeting of the Transportation Committee of the City Council. We also had that customary place as the final item in the agenda. And it occurred to me during that meeting, at which a very important subject was discussed, that after the vote had occurred and all discussion had concluded, then it was our place on the agenda to speak. In other words, we had no opportunity to influence the outcome of the Transportation Committee's decision. And it is the custom of the City Council to take public comment prior to votes. And so it seemed, and I will be making a request to the Transportation Committee that we present earlier in the program so that if we have advice, and on that occasion we didn't, so no harm was done at all. But if we have advice, the committee will have the advantage of that advice before voting. So similarly, the Transportation Department is more than an important part of our deliberations because they are professionals. They have their finger on the pulse, and we should have the benefit early in our own discussions of any input that Kwaku and other members of the Transportation Department might like to provide to us. Does that make sense to all you guys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Plus, that way Kwaku also doesn't have to sit through everything and then drive all the way home across the bridge and all that kind of stuff. So it allows him to get his part in, and if he doesn't want to stay, he doesn't have to.
Indeed. I notice he is not with us yet, which is too bad, but I hope that he will join us and we will get to him when he does show up. Okay, and now we get to reports from committee members, and the first item on the agenda is left over from the last time. Elvia isn't here, but Tom is. You two were going to conclude our deliberations and actually write something that we could provide to the city council on this subject. Tom, could you wrap it up for us?
Sure. And I sent kind of the wording to you in a reply email, but I just distilled down the discussion into something that was pretty easy to consume and vote on. It essentially says that the Transportation Board recommends the following signage for parking spaces designated for electric vehicles in the Hillman garage. And it provides a description of those two signs. One being your traditional no parking symbol, followed by for electric vehicles only. And then the second, more of a like an informational sign. So white sign, green lettering that says vehicle must be actively charging, violators will be towed at owner's expense.
Well, that sounds reasonable to me. I confess I did not see the email and have not read it, but you have read it to us.
Yeah, it's short.
And if I invite discussion of among members of the board, and if that is after we've concluded that, I'll take a motion for a vote on that wording to transmit to the city council.
Also move.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
Bert, I missed the last meeting and I read the minutes, but I can't quite catch what we're voting on here.
Okay, there was a recommendation from a member of the public which set Elvia and Tom into looking into the rules as they apply to electric vehicle parking spaces in city garages. Tom, would you like to distill that, distill the problem, what was recommended and what you concluded would be a sensible thing for the city to do from this point forward?
Sure. So there was the resource who had written into the Transportation Board provided a significant amount of background information on, different laws and ordinances that describe the type of paint and signage and layout for electric vehicle parking. So that came into the board, I guess, in January. And so we took it up in February's meeting just to discuss with Elvia kind of running the point, even though she's not really deep on the legal side, but she is, kind of our EV expert, right? So, to kind of recap a 30-second overview of that conversation, the intent, Elvia and my intent was to make it clear to users of the Hillman garage that the parking spaces that have charging infrastructure are only to be used for electric vehicles at all times under all circumstances. And the electric vehicles who park there must be actively charging, with the concept that we want those spaces to turn over quickly so that people who own EVs feel like there's always an empty spot, I'll be okay. So anyway, that was the intent of that, again, distilled language that I read that we want to post on signage in the Hillman garage. And I think our kind of assignment was to recommend to the city what should the signage for the Hillman garage be when you guys finish the renovation. And that was the kind of what I had read at the top of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are you happy with the reading of the words that Tom has already provided us, or would you like to go through that one more time?
Can you read them one more time, Tom?
Yeah, sure. So the text of what I sent, and maybe should I forward this, Kurt, to Tara so she has the text and doesn't have to transpose it?
Sure.
You got a big vote there.
Yes.
All right. I will pull your email out and do that momentarily. But it says, this is kind of the in between the kind of quote marks. The Annapolis Transportation Board recommends that the city adopt the following signage for electric vehicle enabled parking spots in the Hillman garage. Sign 1, white with red lettering, no parking symbol, followed by the text, except for electric vehicles. Sign 2, white with green lettering, Electric vehicle must be actively charging. Violators will be towed at owner's expense. End of quote.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second, and it's time to vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right. Abstaining? Did you get the
I
vote?
don't think I
Tara?
did. Zoe, you're not an abstain. You don't vote. Is that my understanding?
I vote yes.
No, Zoe.
Oh,
Yes, doesn't Zoe vote?
I
Yes.
didn't see a vote, Zoe. I'm sorry. I missed your vote.
Yeah.
Kurt, you sent me some instructions that I do vote, right?
yeah. I see nothing in the enabling legislation that makes you anything less than a full-fledged voting member of the Transportation Board.
So I may abstain from time to time, depending on the topic, but I'll vote on this one.
All right.
Favorably?
Yes, yes.
And David, may I get your vote?
Who's, there's
David
no
is
David.
on mute, so
David's on mute.
I don't even see David.
I see a block with his name.
I don't.
Here he comes. I
Here he
vote
is.
aye.
Thank you, David.
All right.
I have 8 positive votes. Thank you.
Okay. All right, that wraps up that legislative item. It's not really legislation. It may be handled administratively with no need for legislation at all. But before going on to the real legislative item, which is next on the agenda, I noticed that Kwaku has appeared. Kwaku, we had a discussion about where you would most properly appear in the agenda. And I think there's a pretty good consensus that it makes sense to put you earlier so that we can have the benefit of your expertise and advice as we formulate our own. And if that's all right with you, I would like to turn to you now for your place on the agenda.
All right, thank you, Kurt. Yes, I think that is appropriate. Just one update regarding the FY23 transit grant application, which was on council agenda last week, I believe, because one of the requirements for the application is to submit to add a council resolution before even MTA actually will process the application. So last Monday, council did vote to suspend all the normal process just to approve the resolution so that we will be able to submit the application on time. The deadline, I believe, is March 25th, which is coming fast. Almost everything is set. There was a legal notice in the local newspaper in terms of people who would like to come to the department and look at the application, and if they have any concerns, they should let us know. So that was in the, I believe, 17th, 18th, and 19th of day of 19th March. 17, 18, and 19 March of the capital newspaper, which is in the Annapolis local area. So far, we have not received any comments. So we are getting ready to submit it to MTA for processing. As usual, we'll be asking money for operating for the fixed routes and ADA paratransit. We will also be asking money for vehicle replacement based upon our vehicle replacement plan and also for preventive maintenance plan. Just a quick note on the vehicle replacement plan. I think many of us have heard about council desires to have electric buses. The application packet comes with vehicle cost information that we use. So typically, if you are running, say, cutaway buses and you want to replace them in kind, basically you indicate, but it does not really tell you whether it's going to be a gas or diesel or hybrid. But based upon the current cost information in the grant application, there is no federal or state funds to be able to purchase electric bus. I say it because the total comes to like 30-foot clean diesel bus is about 410,000. I know that currently one 30-foot electric bus is about $650,000. So based upon the cost information, I know that it's not enough. However, if we get an award for vehicle replacement and the city desire is to buy electric bus, there is no federal or state requirement that they cannot add to that, so far as they will buy FTA compliant electric bus. That is the only requirement. So I said it because last time there was issue with, do we accept the capital grant because there is not enough money to buy electric bus? I would say yes, because if you don't accept it, it means the city has to foot 100% of the cost of the electric bus. So whatever that money comes in, I will strongly recommend that the board actually recommend to the city council to accept every dollar that comes in, because that is one step in the process. So you get an award, so it will come with an agreement. So you have to sign for the agreement. For instance, for the agreement, it comes in two parts: your operating agreement for the fixed route and the ADA, and your capital agreement, which basically also is for all capital items, including preventive maintenance. So for instance, you want the capital grant for your PM, you don't want the vehicle money, you cannot pick and choose. So you have to either sign the entire agreement or basically reject it, which means that you reject every penny of the capital grant. But when you sign the agreement, and then you have the choice to pick and choose which grant you want to use. If you don't use it, they will take it back. They will put another announcement out, and another agency can actually ask for that. And it has happened to Annapolis before. I have said this before. There was a time we got about $250,000 to run a pilot project for job access and reverse commute route from Annapolis to Cromwell train station, and the city did reject that. So everything went away. We didn't get the money to buy the vehicle. We didn't get any operating grants to help, and then the whole project actually fell apart. So we will be submitting the grant application come March 25th, and then we will wait to hear the award letters coming in to determine how much we will be getting. Just for your information, for FY 2022, because of the CARE funds and the special funds together with the regular grants, we did pretty well in terms of grants award, in totaling over $4 million to help pay for the net operating deficits of the vehicle operations, and also to buy buses and some other equipment for our maintenance division. That's all that I have. If anybody has any question on the grant application, I'll be very happy to answer that.
I'd like to begin with congratulations for getting the approval of the City Council to submit the application. It was an interesting conversation, but the fact is that the city is in no way committed finally to take the grant. The city always has.
I do agree with you on that.
Yes, I can't really conceive of this happening, but the city can refuse to take an awarded grant if it decides to for any reason. And but the point is to make the deadline and get the application in on time. And I congratulate you on doing that.
Thank you.
All right. Do these add up to approximately $5 million? Do I have that right, or is it less than that?
I don't have them. I had a summary of it. I thought I brought it with me, but I can send you what you are requesting. Traditionally, based upon the history of the awards, whatever that we request, typically for operating grants, we don't get that. For capital grants, we do get normally what we do request for. For instance, we are requesting money for 2 vehicles replacement that have reached their useful life. In fact, in terms of age and mileage, they are way over. So based upon their vehicle cost information, this is based upon regular clean diesel. It's about $410,000 a piece. We are likely to get 90% of that in capital grant. And that is one thing, Kurt, I do agree with you that city council may reject, which means that the city has to come up with its own own money to buy the electric buses to replace this. I mean, based upon what I have seen in other jurisdictions, whether to buy electric bus or not is not the issue, is what kind of level of service that you want to provide. So if you want to maintain your current level of service, then whatever that you get, you use until you are in the position to basically buy whatever that you want. So the city needs to look at the priorities in terms of electric bus, or you want to improve the level of service, i.e., do you want to run the service every 30 minutes or every 1 hour or every 15 minutes? Because that is what the customers actually see, not necessarily the kind of bar that they will be riding in. So
I can't tell you how emphatically I agree with that point of view. It is the level of service that, in my view, needs to be protected above all else. And
exactly.
yes. Is there any other discussion before Kwaku concludes? Yes, Alderwoman Pindell Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been kind of, I guess, surprised by, I guess, some of the discussion during the council meetings concerning these grants, whether we accept them or we don't. And I mean, for me, it seems like a pretty simple decision, but I guess for some it's not. And I guess I would make a couple of suggestions, possibly, Mr. Chair, maybe getting a few of my colleagues together and kind of having a discussion about the importance of these grants. I mean, Dr. Dubois, I think, does an excellent job of explaining it to us, but somehow or another there's I think, this is just me, some sort of disconnect that I can't quite figure out. But I would suggest that you take no more than 4 at a time, possibly, because we don't want to run afoul of the Open Meetings Act. But also, in addition to that, I would suggest that anytime there's a grant that comes up on the agenda for the city council, that you and your board members attend and be available to answer questions about the grant and how it benefits level of service, and any other issues you think would be salient to propose. Because I've been quite, I guess, surprised at some of the discussion and the amount of money. To me, for me, it's kind of a no-brainer, but I can only speak for myself. But I would suggest you take maybe 3 or 4 at a time, kind of sit down and find out exactly what seems to be the issue. And then I would suggest whenever there's money, grant money for us to vote on, it used to be pretty much kind of a rubber stamp, but it's not anymore, that you attend, you and your colleagues, as many on your board, and try to explain the importance of these grants. I mean, like I said, Dr. Dubois has done a wonderful job, but I'm not quite sure what else he can do or say. But I would make those 2 suggestions.
Thank you. Those are creative suggestions, and I think we really should follow through with them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I did watch the city council meeting on this, and my take on what the hesitancy was not that these grants were there was a problem with the grants. I thought that what I heard was that there was a problem with the city being on the hook if the grants don't come through. Was I missing that?
I think it's
okay, go ahead.
several. different things that I can't. I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack, but I haven't quite figured it out myself. You've probably done a better job at it than me. Dr. Duval, go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, if the grants don't come through, which that means the city has to foot the entire bill of the transit operations. I think the issue now has been, it's time for Annapolis Transit to run battery electric buses. And therefore, if the grant money is not enough to buy an electric bus, then we should not accept it. And quote unquote, based upon what happened at last year's supplemental appropriation meeting with City Council, we will reject it and send a message back to MTA. And I did tell them that MTA would take the grant, they will put another notice, and another transit agency that is more willing to invest in its operations would take it. Annapolis has done before, as I said earlier, and that $250,000 went to another agency that wanted to provide more services for its citizens. And frankly, there is no set thing such as zero emission vehicle. I'm sorry to say that, but there is nothing like that. We can talk about zero emission tailpipe vehicles, but when they come to think of the greenhouse effects of any vehicle, there is nothing, no such vehicle as zero emission vehicle. Because if you take into account the production of the battery and the emission that it generates, it causes some pollutions. And I do have EPA models that I have run on both diesel and battery buses that do produce emissions. So the emphasis by some of the city council members on battery electric vehicles, to me, is not our priority here. Our priority is to be able to provide reliable service for our citizens. That is number one. Whether you are using bicycles or minivans or clean diesel buses or electric buses, that should be the number one. And I have personally sent email to some of the council members who usually will raise this issue of battery electric buses, and nobody has even responded to the email trying to have one-on-one discussion with them to explain to them the process. And the fact that if you even sign the agreement to accept the grants, you are not obligated to use the money. Yeah. And so I don't have anybody coming.
My fear is that at some point, the more grants we turn down, the less will be looked at as a governmental entity to be serious about accepting or doing anything. So when there is a change in non-diesel or whatever buses, regular buses, then we're not at the table anymore and we're not taken seriously. And I think it's worth a conversation, Mr. Chair, for you to find out exactly what the problem seems to be and to make it known that we don't want to be in a position where we don't end up getting anything at any time. And that's my fear.
Indeed it is. And I will take that on for the board as something we should do. I agree so strongly with Kwaku that the level of service is sort of priority number one. And on the other hand, I do recognize that there's a strong feeling on the city council and among us on the board that we should join this revolution, which is being born for conversion to electric vehicles, because the total system emissions and pollution will be declining with time as we convert to the electric economy. And yes, there's no such thing as a zero emission. There's no such thing as a zero emission vehicle, but the trend is in that direction.
Okay, just quickly, we are on board. We are part of the state efforts to do feasibility study to determine what it would take to transition to these so-called zero emission vehicles. The report will be coming out this year, and it will details what needs to be in place, what kind of training, how much it will cost. So I have urged council to wait for the report so that they can actually take that as a blueprint to move in that direction, but not to reject any grant because we don't have money to buy a battery electric bus.
Okay.
I thank the Alderwoman for bringing this matter up, and I take it even farther than you do, Alderwoman. I am frequently confused by the discussions that revolve around the grants, but I'm aware, I think correctly, that this is a complicated issue. It's not just an individual opinion issue on the part of the council members. I think there is some unease, considerable unease, I think, about the budget process that will be involved in making a commitment like this. I seriously doubt that there's any reservation about the wisdom of going green and electric. But there is an intention, particularly on the part of some council people, to do it in the most monetarily safe way, budget-wise way. So I would suggest that that all of us be engaged in that conversation somehow, because it's not just a matter of fact, I think, or getting the details straight or understanding the very precise points that Kwaku is making. There are subtleties involved. There are political subtleties involved, and there's concern about expenditure. And I think that's something that has to be a discussion, not a report. So I don't know how we could open it up to have a dialogue with various council people, but some of them are more questioning, more skeptical than others, and maybe their point of view could be brought to our attention collectively.
Thank you, Carol. John also has his hands up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to attempt to indulge in a little bit of mathematics here. That may be frightening to some. Please bear with me. What I heard the director say was that if we were to just leave electric vehicles out of the discussion, and let's say, I'm going to make the numbers a little easier, Kwaku, allow me. Let's say it's a $400,000 bus, and the grant we would get for it would be $360,000. That was 90%, was roughly the number you were saying. Again, these are notional numbers to get a point across. So with that, we deliver the service that we promised. If we accepted the grant, we buy the bus. If we wanted to in turn buy an electric bus, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Director, that's significantly more money. I think it's in the neighborhood of $650. Is that about right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the question the council might be struggling with is, how do we fund that other $250? Because we're not going to get a bigger grant because we didn't increase the service. But please correct me if I'm wrong, the city would get benefits from the electric bus. It would get a reduction in maintenance costs. I think we've agreed on that. It would get a reduction in, of course, fuel costs. There are other consumables that go along with this. And the director has in the past put forth very convincing arguments about the economic benefits of an EV fleet. So I would say to the council, both the Transportation Council, Madam Alderwoman, and to the City Council at large, I would say, are those savings, do they justify the additional $250? In which case we accept the grant, buy the more expensive bus, and collect all the savings for the 8, 10, 15 years we're going to run that bus. That's my point, Mr. Chair.
I do agree. And that is the reason why, if you recall, last summer, the department did present a kind of overview of a transition to zero emission vehicles to articulate the costs and the benefits. So I thought that has been put to rest until last Monday that it came back. Apparently, I was not good enough to explain the benefits to them, that when you do that, again, remember, you are getting almost half of the money in grants. And right. You also save at the very end of that. But when they don't see the grant money enough for a bus, it looks like that's rejected.
That's the paradigm we have to break. Yep.
Yeah.
But I want to make one more point, and I'll try to do it with my limited budgetary language. Certainly there would be savings of the sort that you point out, John, but and that Kwaku could effect, but it would be separated, in fact, by a different budget year. If you're going to need $200,000 more in year one, but you're not going to get it, you're going to get the $250,000. You're going to have a $250,000 shortfall that year, and you can't make it up in cost savings and efficiency until year two. And
so maybe the conversation we need to have is with Jody Dickerson about how we are managing, and this is Kurt's favorite topic, how we're managing capital expense. And my experience with capital expenses is they are recognized in a capital fund, and then they, through depreciation and interest and other allocations, they are spread out over a number of years, so they actually hit the operating budget.
Exactly. The city, for large capital items that have a lifetime of many years, the city finances them according to the principle that you should match the period of you should match the financial service period to the service lifetime of the asset. And the city typically does that by going to the bond market and buying and getting debt which covers it over the long term. That's how you handle long-term capital expenditures.
So I think maybe a conversation with Ms. Dickerson might get us where we need to go.
And also some urging of the council to take this long-range view. You know, it may what we may be getting at the council meetings is a kind of immediate response to the danger of getting into some fiscal difficulty. But there's no reason why we can't take what you're saying, John, and urge the council to do the planning at the staff level that's necessary for this, acquiring the cost savings that will make up the difference, the shortfall between the grant money and what the cost of the equipment is. And you know, I don't want to fault anybody for faulty planning, but I've certainly been around this government long enough to know that sometimes that isn't upfront.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've laid the groundwork for discussions that need to occur.
That's why
And
they do charge us depreciation. They do charge us bond interest under the city overhead charges. So
yeah,
all these things you are talking about, they charge it against the transportation budget.
sure. Yeah, of course.
Where the savings would get recognized, right? And let's not remember that the last time this board met, there wasn't a war going on with Russia, and gas prices are going up, and the business case is getting better.
Okay.
Kurt, this is Elvia. Could I have a word?
Please.
Yeah, and I apologize for joining late. That was just a mistake on my part. One thing that we haven't addressed here doesn't really have anything to do with money, but we should consider the externalities of continuing to spew out these emissions out of buses, particularly diesel emission. I mean, what kind of city do we want to be? You know, do we want to have city assets that make asthma worse for children or for anybody who's got asthma? You know, there are all these things that aren't factored into the financial equations that are important. And they're also part of the environmental justice equation, because the buses service people usually of restricted means. So, you know, you don't put that on the ledger, but that's important.
Indeed it is.
So,
okay. Thank you.
Question, Kwaku, do you ever see the application of capital funds and operating funds to the purchase of a piece of capital equipment in Annapolis?
For Annapolis Transit or for the city of Annapolis?
Anything. Do you ever see commingling of capital funds and operating funds in order to make a capital purchase, or is there sort of a hard line between the two?
Normally, there is a hard line between the two. We buy our vehicles under the Fleet Management Vehicle Replacement Plan, which is managed by the fleet manager, but we work closely with them. What I have seen in the past, that is very recent, is that because the grants award comes in later, what they are trying to do is to add the expected capital grant in the operating budget for approval with a local match, so that once the grant award is given, we don't have to do another supplemental allocation and then go through all the processes again. That is the only time that you can actually see a commingle of the operating and capital grant, but they are actually specified. The whole idea is to simplify the process so that once the city signs the grant agreement, you don't have to go to council and then go over all the same issues again. But
Okay, so you
again,
need matching
the-
funds. You need to highlight
Yeah.
matching funds. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that obligation can be moved into the capital improvement plan at a later
Exactly.
date. Okay, well, thank you. I propose we move on to the next agenda, or else we'll be here all night. And the next item is the legislative one. It's 0922
Well,
and
Wait. Your
Yes.
agenda has on fare free transit and bicycle.
Oh.
Because Kwaku was going to be early and then he came in mid-stride.
right.
You're still
I
on
know.
the committee updates.
thank
Yep.
you for
Yeah.
Zoe
keeping me
has his
honest.
hands up. Zoe
Pardon?
has his hands up.
What,
Pardon?
Kwaku?
Zoe,
Miss-
that one? Yeah.
Oh, Zoe has her hand up.
I can,
Uh,
for the sake of
Oh,
time,
yes, there you are.
I wanted to just mention one more comment with regard to Alderwoman Pindell Charles' comments, and that is that in some cases, the decision to pursue the approval to pursue a grant or has a sort of a tail in a policy or land use decision that would come in the event of you know, and the example isn't necessarily to do with the electric buses, but it does have to do with the electric ferry. So it's a better example in that there is a land use decision about the ferry launch, and any support infrastructure that would need to go into supporting a ferry, which may be why there's, questions about pursuing, grant funding to support that. In the case of the bus or in the case of the ferry. And I think that's why folks really wanted to ensure that there would be a feasibility study and more information that would come before the city would make a final decision on approving that use before, and so it kind of got wrapped up in the whole grant and financial discussion. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not necessarily the grant funding, but that in many cases, there's sort of follow-on land use or support infrastructure decisions that need to be made that haven't yet been approved.
Thank you, Zoe.
These conversations been going on for a year, even before we started talking about the ferry. It came to a real big brouhaha, I guess, about a year ago. And I won't get into what it was, but this was long before the ferry has been discussed more recently. I mean, your point is well taken, but this goes back further.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sure.
Next item, thank you, Beth, for correcting me, is fare free transit. Well, let me turn to you, Beth and John, and I will say anything that needs to be said beyond that.
Well, nothing really has gone on. My only real comment is to figure out, maybe Rhonda Pindell Charles can tell us just what the city council is thinking or the transportation committee is thinking, and whether they're really talking about it, whether they're doing any kind of investigation with it. I hope it's not just falling flat and, kind of hanging out there, whatever. But I think as far as us three, Kurt, John, and myself, I can't see that we've got any more input at this point in time. We need to know what the city is doing, or if they need anything more from us, if they want us to do any more, just what's going on. I don't know.
I'll be honest, I have not seen any emails come through about it. But I would leave that discussion to Alderwoman O'Neill, who's the chair of our Transportation Standing Committee. That's the person that you can direct it to. We honestly have been I guess, overwhelmed by all of our public safety issues. And I'm not going to say that this fare free transit issue is not a very important one, but we've been somewhat consumed by that. But that's a question for Alderwoman O'Neill.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure, what's today, 21st? Might be this week. I can't remember what day our next meeting is, but that's certainly something that your chairman can bring up at our next meeting to ask us about an update on that. I don't know what Alderwoman O'Neill has been working on in regards to that. So I don't want to answer for her.
Okay, if Kurt wants to find, or I can get in touch with her, Kurt, either, or you can as the chair of the transportation board, but as the committee, I can get in touch with her if you want.
Yeah, be my guest. I have had a conversation with her.
You did?
And yes, and I can get to that. But why don't we give John a crack at it?
Yeah, and
this?
we can talk offline too, if you want, if no one else is interested on what O'Neill said.
Okay.
My report's going to sound a lot like Beth's. I haven't really heard or done anything, with the exception of last week ago. The mayor came and gave a presentation on the state of Annapolis to residents here at Park Place, and I had a chance to see him afterwards. And I asked him, "What's happened to the fare free proposal?" He said, "I don't know. I'm a big supporter of it." So I think we have a lot of wind in our sails, but we're not trimming the ship to sail to port yet. So I would encourage Kurt, you to attend the transportation council meeting and find out how to move this procedurally along. I think we're missing the opportunity to tie it to the Hillman garage, and that is going to come down before our next meeting. So now is the time to do that.
Thanks.
That's my 2 cents.
Okay, here's what I know on this subject. I did have a brief communication with Karma on this subject, and one of the things I've observed this in many fields, and it seems to be cropping up here too, and that's a question of focus. There are an infinite number of things that could be done to improve the transportation system, transit system in particular. And everybody has ideas and preferences over the things that they would like to see happen. For example, Karma O'Neill has pointed out, I think correctly, that the city might benefit from a relook and a possible redesign of the routing system. How many buses, where they should run, and so forth. And this is the kind of thing that all transit systems should redo on a periodic basis, just to see that the system is continually optimized. I've never gone through this, but my preliminary indication is that major reoptimization, redesign of transit systems is a long process that takes some money. Takes money for planning and consulting. It takes time in order to look at all of the alternatives and make recommendations for top priority reconfigurations. Typically, these things take public hearings with input from the public, so that the new routing system is the best that can be done for the population that needs to be served. All of these things, they take time, they take money, and I think they're very important. They should happen. On the other hand, there are some things, in fact, there's one thing that we found that takes essentially zero time, very little money, and something that we could do right now to deliver almost instantaneous benefit to the entire transit riding public. And we could enlarge that, and that is by converting to fare-free transit. And so my recommendation continues to be, yes, all of these other things that need to be done to make a more perfect transit system should be done, but there's no reason that those things must come first before something we can do quickly and cheaply right now. And that thing is fare-free transit. Okay, that's one thing. And the final thing I want to tell you, you may not have seen this yet, Rhonda, but I got a communication from the county council that there is a letter signed by the chairman of the Anne Arundel County Council and Stuart Pittman, the county executive, saying that they are committing to fare free transit on a permanent basis. They will be putting it into the budget. For them, it's a small amount, as it is for the city of Annapolis. They have been influenced by our own discussions and have decided to embrace it and to champion it within the county. They have also turned to us in this letter. I haven't seen it yet. And I don't know if it's arrived on your doorstep yet, but I'm told that the letter asks the city of Annapolis to join in fare-free systems so that riders who happen to be using both systems see the same thing on both systems. They don't have to suddenly get out the fare when they transfer from one to the other. And I think that has enormous benefits, and I'm looking forward to seeing the letter. I hope it is a good letter. I hope it has effect with the city council. So that's all I know on this subject.
No, I was not aware of that, so I'll be waiting to see it.
Good.
I'm one of those people who is currently using both systems. I've gone back to riding the bus much more frequently than during the worst of the pandemic. And I use the county bus for a short hop. I could, in the abilities that I have for riding the local buses, find a way to use the county bus more extensively in order to take advantage of the fare-free setup. But I hate to lose the opportunity, especially given the existence of that letter, to join forces with the county, because it would simplify things so much.
Yeah, transit systems more and more are being regionalized, and to the extent that we can make them all look the same, I think it's good. Okay, next item on the agenda is our around the table thing.
Mr. Chair, Mr.
Do you have
Chair,
Kwaku, you had something, Kwaku?
Yeah, talking about the apparent kind of lack of movement on your proposal, do we have a champion on city council to basically put together a legislation that will take council? I think so. That's very, very important, because for most transit initiatives, you need to get a champion. So if you don't have one, you may want to look into that. You also did mention the review of the transit system. Actually, we do that every 5 years. In 2010, we did it. Basically led to a major change in the system. If you were here that time, most of the buses were stopping at Spar Road to transfer, for forced transfer, almost every rider. So when we did that, we changed that. Every 5 years we do that, and we get MTA and FTA paid for 90% of the consulting cost of that. So the last one we did was 2020. I can send you the report and all the detailed analysis in terms of socioeconomic analysis, who are the transit dependent, and so on and so forth.
Excellent.
The county proposal for free fare, I think once we get the letter, I think the city can also suggest that they do increase their transit subsidy, because currently the county transit subsidy fluctuates. Sometimes 200,000, sometimes 150, sometimes 350,000, sometimes $700,000. So with that letter, that will actually give the city more leverage to ask the county for more money for potential loss of revenue with the fare-free system. That's
Amen.
Why.
Yeah, that's very important, and that's a real high priority. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Let's go around the table, and I'm permuting the regular order. I'm tired of seeing Zoe last, so tonight she's first.
And I don't have much of an update, Kurt. I could go first tonight. I do have good news, and that is State Highway Administration and Anne Arundel County did sign an MOU to advance the feasibility study for a bike path down King George Street and through the Naval Academy's property to 450, then leading to Taylor Avenue to the west and to the Naval Academy Bridge to the east. So that project is moving forward with advancing two different courses of action in terms of design forward to the next for the next phase of engineering study. And then it will, when one option is selected based on our review at the Navy and other partners, the look and feel of the project and, the topography and required, stormwater, measures as well as, and how it may impact property lines, the funding will support full design. So that's good news there. So I just wanted to share that.
Yay. Thanks so much. Beth?
Yeah, Beth?
We missed the legislation. Can we go back after we do the roundtable? We missed the off-street
bicycles?
parking off-street parking requirements, eliminating off-street parking for bars and restaurants.
I'm having
and
big
stuff.
trouble following
You
our own
certainly
agenda.
I was going to say, every chair has an off day, but this is yours.
Okay.
We can go back to it when we're done with the roundtable.
All
I just
right.
didn't want you to miss it.
Yeah, thanks. Let's go through the roundtable and then come back and do this thing properly. Beth, you're next.
Okay. I have two things. I have comments on the legislation when we get back to it. But the other thing is, I attended a Greater Washington podcast on fare free transportation. And it was very similar. I'll tell you, I only did it by audio because I was in the car, but so it was harder for me to follow. But I think the biggest person was this woman from Montgomery County, Montgomery County is going fare free or has gone fare free. And it looks like they did it temporarily, and now it looks like they're going to do it permanently. And she gave a very nice talk, but she didn't say really anything new. She stressed that the benefits are equity to everybody, all your residents, and that the increase, they find that the fare system is about 80% people of color, 50% increased in students that rode the bus. And that they did an equity study, and the equity study was very important in going with the fare free. They also did a service frequency increase along with the fare free, so that they, instead of a headway of like every half an hour, they're now a headway of 20 minutes or something like that. So that made a big difference in their increase in ridership too. And they felt that making the service better was very important, as well as the fare free. They felt that it was an economic case that increases mobility. It connects people from home, work, shopping, appointments, entertainment. And they also saw that the people that needed it the most were your essential workers, your restaurant workers, your people like that. And they also said that as their buses filled up, they had much easier time going for more grant money. That so all this is exactly what we've been saying. And they said that their fare box was their biggest problem. and that there was a safety issue as well as the headway, the fare box was really an issue for them, and there was a lot more
in terms
said.
of time consumed, right?
Yes, time
Driver time.
consumed, as well as issues of arguments and all kinds of things. And but there, as good as it was, the discussion was, I didn't think it gave us anything new. It just really reinforced all the things that we've learned from everybody else that I've talked to and then passed on around the country that have gone fare free. So it just really reinforces everything that our report has come up with. So that's
I participated in that as well, and I concur with everything you said. You gave an excellent summary. All right, next, I have nothing. Tom?
Yes, I only have one thing to pass on. I received a survey that Anne County is doing to improve like their master walk bike path setup. So I can forward that. I mean, I think it came through actually my daughter's like Cougar Chronicle from Bates, but it's basically they're looking for community input on how to incorporate more bike and walking paths into the county's master plan, which I think obviously would include Annapolis. So I can send that to you, Tara, if you want to include it in the notes or like a link to it.
Yeah, that's great.
I would just say
Alright.
it's called the walk and roll plan, and it has an interacting mapper component where you can click and highlight different segments of roadway where you'd like to see improvements all throughout the county and in the city.
Okay. Elvia?
I don't think I have anything to add. I believe Tom covered the information that we had, the parking sign information. But I just want to reiterate the things that folks are saying about the fare, fare free are the same issues that have to do with equity in providing transportation that doesn't emit harmful carcinogenic fumes. I just can't say that enough. And I think that if we spend money on fossil fueled buses, we are completely missing the point here. It's like the post office being tone deaf about buying, thousands of fossil fueled trucks. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. I thought the post office had made a commitment to conversion. Am I
No,
wrong?
only 10% of the thousands and thousands of buses that they're going to buy. It's only
I see.
10%. Yeah.
They don't have the money to do it. That's their problem. That's their
Well,
problem. They don't have the money.
We all need a long range view because as somebody said earlier, and it might have been Kwaku that, or it wasn't Kwaku, but
Tara.
the service in the long run, it pays for itself because the service is the maintenance is so much less.
And there may be an issue of service lifetime. They may want to roll in the electric component as the old component reaches the end of its service life. Is some of that going on?
Well, that would be a good thing, as opposed to buying brand new fossil fueled buses. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Elvia. Charles Brooks isn't here. Kara Plewinski isn't here. David DeQuincia?
Kurt, I joined late.
Yeah, hi, Kurt, I don't have anything.
Oh,
this
Charles,
month.
you are here. Sorry. Okay, David, thanks. Charles, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, not currently. I was waiting for the legislation as well, so.
Yeah, okay, we'll roll around to that. Carol?
Thank you. I haven't done anything in regard to our relationship with the county other than hop on more county buses. But I do want to bring up again the possibility of inviting someone from the Eastport Civic Association to report to us on the report that the association did about parking in Eastport. That's important currently because of the problems that are developing with parking in Eastport. And also in the future, in regard to the other excitement in my life, which is the hopefully the developing ferry system, which will impact Eastport and parking in Eastport considerably. So I think some long range looking at this point at what's happening already in Eastport with parking and what's going to happen real soon and in the long term is important. So if you all agree, Kurt, you or I'd be willing to help could ask hopefully the head of Eastport.
We're coming under legislation. We're coming to this this parking item, and let's bring that up and decide how to act on it. Carol, thanks. All right, Vince Harriman, is he here? No. John?
Very little to say that hadn't already been said. I too am looking forward to discussion on the legislation. I did want to report that it seems that the circulator has procured 2 new buses. They are diesel and regular gas. I'm not sure which they are, which is a disappointment because the rumor had been they would be electric. And they aren't going to be
rumor.
wrapped.
We were told they were going to be electric.
I was being very, very kind to somebody that said something. Yes.
Yes.
And the drivers were telling me they were getting electric vehicles. So I don't know where we went off the rails there with that. And they aren't going to be wrapped until June. So for 3 months, we're going to have a circulator that nobody can find because nobody knows what rest and limousine service is.
Uh-oh.
I
Okay.
guess, Kwaku, that would be a request. Well,
yeah, let me make a comment on that thing. Yeah, I did hear that when the time comes for those resting cutaway buses to be replaced, they were looking into replacing them with electric vehicles. And I believe it's the cost because I did check into the cutaway electric bus, which is about 3 times that of a gasoline version. Given the fact that resting is profit oriented, I believe, I'm not saying they did, but I believe that took into account. The electric cutaway bus is about $300,000. And in real, in operations, you get only 70 miles per charge. So that could be a factor. The buses are going to be wrapped as part of the enhanced mobility plan that the mayor has talked about. Annapolis will provide additional bus during the morning and the evening rush hours, particularly to move most of the city employees from Park Place to downtown. So that's all that I have for now. But I believe it's the cost of the cutaway. So the price is $300,000. It's a relatively new one. They use a Proterra battery, and it's quite expensive compared to a gasoline, which is about $93,000. So that could be a factor.
They need to get Elvia on the team that's doing these assessments.
I can't tell you how disappointed I am in this kind of stuff. You know, at what point do we put people's health first above the money? So I'm cranky today about this, but really, you know.
Elvia, let me make you smile. I'm working on a grant that basically will pay for 100% of one electric bus. I'm waiting for the final numbers to come out and the agreement. But once I do get agreement and executed by the city, I will share that with you. And that is going to happen this year. So cheer up, something positive is coming our way in terms of battery electric bus.
Okay, let me know if you need help writing the grant.
Sure.
All right, next is Tara Ashmore.
I don't have anything. You guys are all very colorful and I'm not.
All right, that will change.
We'll get you that way.
Yes.
I'm taking that as a compliment.
All right. Thanks. Now we'll get back to the our regularly scheduled program. We finished fare-free transit, bicycles. I have just one item. This was introduced, the bicycles on sidewalks thing was introduced in the House of Delegates, and we have had crossover to the Senate. Frankly, I'm out of the loop and I don't know where it is. I've got to find out next week where it stands and testify if it's necessary, but I will keep you informed as I learn what is happening to that legislation. The next legislative item is 0922, off-street parking requirements, eliminating off-street parking. And the folks who signed up to work on that were Beth and John and Kara Pluinski, if I have that correct. Beth, would you like to tell me where you are on that?
I'll let John go first this trip around.
Oh boy. Hang on a second. I'm
I'll
modifying
rebut
for
him
my
later.
poor thing. So I have a lot. I did a lot of research thinking about this bill, but to maybe characterize it in the big picture, there are existing ordinances. They're quite extensive that provide how to calculate the necessary off-street parking for any kind of entity, bowling alley, restaurant, church, you name it. They're all in there, hairstylist. It's pages and pages and pages of our ordinance that tell them how much off-street parking. I believe this legislation is really aimed at why is our city covered in macadam? We've got a beautiful city. We shouldn't be forcing people to put in off-street parking and big macadam lots that are bad for the environment because they cause runoff, that are bad for the architectural beauty of the city, and that generally should be replaced with things that are of greater value to the citizenry. So if that's the motivation behind this legislation, I get it. I have a couple of notions. The first is we tend to think when we think about restaurants, because this is specific to restaurants, as Ward 1 downtown things. But in Ward 1 specifically, the zoning requirements exempt restaurants from this legislation because of the existence of Hillman and Gott and other public garage spaces. So the first thing I want to advise the board here is that this really isn't a Ward 1 issue. It's really the other wards that are going to be affected by this legislation. The second comment that I'm going to throw out there is I'm going to expose my libertarianness here and say that if a restaurant owner wants people to come to their restaurant, they're going to calculate the right amount of off-street parking they need, right? And they're going to do it in the most beautiful way they can because they want people to come use their restaurant. So I'm becoming a little bit saying, why do we have all this ordinance to tell people what to do when in fact, as happens with every law, the world changes. We're going to electric vehicles, we're going to on-demand pickup services like Uber and Lyft, and the calculations are probably no longer valid for anybody. And that brings me to my third point. I don't know why we're singling restaurants out in this legislation. I don't see, I think Kurt gave the one answer that I can believe. They are the squeakiest of the wheels. But I don't think that the intent of this legislation is met by just doing restaurants. So I think my opinion, it should be broadened to all off-street parking. And in my libertarian view, we should strike those requirements for everybody. So that's a pretty bold out there statement that only a transportation board member can make. And I'm going to stop there. I wrote a long email to Beth, but I'll let you pick it up from there, Beth.
I'm not going into your email. because I wrote a long email to John and he responded to it. That was the whole thing. And I don't disagree with anything John said. I mean, we've certainly, as a pair, gone back and forth over it. We have not tragically included Kara because I thought we were going to get together and talk, and we never did. So she's been out of the loop. She really didn't get involved at all. Like I said, I don't disagree with John on anything, but I do think that. If you're going to not have, insist on parking and someone's going to stick a restaurant or say this is expanded to everybody. So it's bars and salons and everything like John was saying. And you just stick them here, there, and everywhere. And you're not considering things like good sidewalks for people to walk on. Good areas where you can park along the road. I mean, Brooks is the alderman. He's in Ward 5, which is Spa Road, Forest Drive. I mean, really not a good area for having people just park along the road and walk somewhere. Necessarily. And I would think that you would make sure that you have the infrastructure to keep people safe before you start thinking about something like this. The other is to potentially make it in areas of the city where parking along the streets is fine because there's a lot of parking, such as in Eastport, which may be changing, but in Eastport or West Annapolis or something like that. And we already know that it doesn't include Ward 1 because it's already exempt because of all the parking garages and everything. So that's really, I'm just thinking that there's other things that might need to happen beforehand, or at least to think about before this legislation goes in. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Rhonda, could you give us an update on what the rhythm of this thing is going to be? Has it passed first reader? How much time do we have to?
They didn't do anything with it last time.
No, I don't think it was on the agenda. I know we've gotten at least 90 emails from residents about it.
Okay.
Good or bad?
Probably
we have
85 of them are supportive.
Do we have time to provide input then? Is that right?
I think so. I haven't looked at next week's agenda.
Okay.
I would say so, but don't quote me on that. But no, probably 90 emails, 85 are in support.
Do you know where?
85.
Do you know in general where in the city those emails have come from, the majority by any chance?
Ward 3.
You can't really tell unless people give the addresses, and
Oh,
a lot of
okay.
people don't. They might say they live in Annapolis, but it might not be within the city limits, or you can't, or they won't give you any kind of identifying information other than their names.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. Well, I will. I'll just put in my 2 cents. This is not a very informed opinion. I will speak as a Ward 2 resident, and our restaurants on a number of occasions have applied for and received waivers from those formal parking requirements. We are abundantly endowed with parking. It's not a problem, and I think it's exaggerated as a problem in this particular part of the city. So personally, before becoming very well educated on the subject, I'm in favor of the proposed legislation. But you on the committee should carry it forward as you think best and make a recommendation to us all. Is there anything else on this parking ordinance?
Well, I would disagree with you, Beth, somewhat about Eastport, and I would guess, Rhonda, that some of those the public responses come from Eastport because this is already an issue in Eastport. You have to pull over to the side of the road on streets in Eastport now as never before. That's always been a pattern, but it's really the pattern now to let somebody pass you on the other side of the street. So this is this legislation will be relevant to developing conditions in Eastport, and I'm urging us to talk to them about it, I think.
Good.
I
You know,
would
the other-
surmise that it's a good number do come from Eastport, but like I said, you can't always tell.
Yeah. The other thing that I brought up that John didn't like me saying is that it, as happens in Annapolis, when, you know, we know that not everybody uses the parking garage, especially at night, they park on the streets. But, you know, those people that live around, closest to downtown, they do have some problems with vandalism when people are leaving the bars and leaving the rest, well, the bars. And you know, and I mean, even just walk around and you can see it, you know, and they're not all that happy with how that works out. And so that's something to consider too, while you're parking, these people are parking in residential neighborhoods. If they're good citizens, that's one thing, but if they're not, that's another thing.
I think a Ward 1 situation is going to develop in Eastport, particularly if the planning that has been proposed by the Maritime Group and the ferry develop into functioning realities for transit, for mobility in Eastport. The parking is going to be as contentious an issue as I have watched it be in Ward 1 for a decade now.
I encourage you to continue your work on this. Pay attention to the legislative calendar so that our input will be useful. And Carol, if you have a particular interest in this, I would suggest that you join the effort and fold in such advice from Eastport as you think will be useful.
Well, do you all agree that you would welcome the comments of the head of the Civic Association? Should we invite him to a meeting?
I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kurt?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I was wondering whether you could handle this as a subcommittee rather than involving the full board at this point.
I thought that was
appreciate-
Carol's intention.
Well, I appreciate the functioning of subcommittees, but I think that is relegating some of these really very public and major concerns in town to study, you know, to research and consideration. I think that inviting people to talk to us as a group makes the issue much more public, and for us as well. It involves us as a, you know, as a body that contributes to decision making more significantly.
Yeah, I think, Carol, you had brought that up before the legislation discussion. You wanted to, was interested in inviting the Eastport Civic Association to come and talk to us at this meeting. That's not what you meant? That's what you meant, right?
Yeah, that is. And in terms of what John is saying, that kind of interaction with somebody as significant as the head of this association means that the public, at least at the leadership level, recognizes that we are engaged in their issue. Other than, and I hate to see something like the sort of research that you've done as a subcommittee on Fare Free and some of the things that John was saying earlier about capital budgets. I mean, that the public needs to know that we are, you know, we are wrestling with those issues on their part, because many of the people in the public are like me. They don't know what the heck is going on, and to hear the discussion is enlightening.
If there's a sense of the committee that you'd like to involve the full board in such a presentation from Eastport, that's fine. I will point out that there are other points of view in other wards, and we have to somehow take them into account properly as well.
But we have to start somewhere.
Rhonda, you have your hand up.
Rhonda.
Yeah, just considering the number of emails, the overwhelming number of emails we've received, I would suggest, and I'm not on your board, that you do have Bill Reichert, your Eastport Civic Association president, come and do a presentation. He's excellent. Because I'm just looking at the volume. Based on the volume, it probably would be a good idea for you all to hear from him, or whoever he brings with him, or whomever is directly dealing with it in ECA. So that's
And-
just my 3 cents worth, because it's inflation. I've moved from 2 cents worth to 3 cents worth.
Good for you. And what's his name?
Bill Reichert.
Bill Reichert.
Alderwoman, is it possible, is it permissible that we could see the 90 emails?
No, they were sent to the council, although some are out there through that tracking system that some people use. There's a public, I don't know what to call it. It's a public tracking system where if you wanna provide testimony, I've seen Carol do it before. You get on that tracking and you can see them publicly. They're out on the web, but most of them, I'd say probably 85 of them came to us directly. So I don't think we could share that since it's only to us.
Well, I suppose
Okay.
with
That's
a
something you can
formal,
ask, you know,
with a formal
I guess
information
Freedom
request,
of
I suppose.
Information Act.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
They pretty
Okay.
much, I'll be honest with you, it's pretty much the same. It's almost like using jot form. They're pretty much the same over and over and over again. It's the
Right.
same language. They all
Right.
pretty much saying the same thing. Mhm.
Okay. Well, if it's the sense of the committee that we do that, Carol, can you arrange for that presentation? And maybe I can ask Brooks to present the other side of the thing. Brooks or somebody from his constituency to do the same thing.
Good idea. Thank you. I'll contact him.
Okay.
Kurt,
Yes,
would
Tara?
you be kind enough to tell me who Brooks is with? His last name? Brooks?
Oh,
who?
Brooks Chandelmeyer is the alderman on the city council from Ward 5.
Thank you.
That does it for legislation, I believe. Is there any other business that any member of the board would like to bring up?
Kurt, I might remind you that your agenda also had comments from the public, and I thought you did have something of note there based on comments earlier.
We covered the only thing that I'm aware of. Are there other public comments that we did not cover earlier? We had the electric vehicle labeling issue, and we did discuss that. That's the only comment from the public that I am aware of. Was there anything else, Tara?
Just then new business, but I don't think they're.
Okay. All right.
I have a point I'd like to make, Mr. Chair, if I might.
Yes, John.
I would just like to say, having read Tara's work from last month and listening to her professionalism today, I want to just say how thankful I am that you have stepped into this role. And I think it's going to produce such a nice quality. Loser, is that what it is?
Yes. Loser.
I thought it was legislator. But I just am very grateful for I think your commitment to us. Thank you.
And
No
I
worries.
am too.
Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Nice words, John. Yes, Rhonda?
Yeah, one thing, I'm sure you all may be aware that the county has a new transportation director, Mr. Sneed. And because Ward 3 is right on the Anne Arundel County line, I have reached out to him just in general, because I also always like to find out and meet with when Ramon Robinson was there, same thing, because it helps Ward 3 a lot to find out what transportation issues are going on right across the line. So I didn't know if you all had possibly anyone talked to him, reached out to him. I think he started about 2 months ago, maybe at the most. But his name is, I think, Samuel, but his last name is Sneed. So just to kind of SNEA.
Thanks for reaching out to him. As Ward 3 goes, so goes the city. So anything you can do to further the cause is great. Yes, I did
Alderwoman,
reach
I
out to
did,
him, and he's already involved in the Fare Free Transit thing, both for the county and possibly for the city.
And I met him at a BWI business partnership thing a month ago. He was brand new, and extended our greetings from the board. And I said, we'd look forward to working with you.
Kwaku has his hands up.
Just FYI, the county is undertaking a feasibility study for a county-wide transit system. And we are working with Mr. Sneed on that. The county has a consultant on board. The county is paying for all the costs involved. But at the staff level, we are providing the details of their data requirements. So the county is again looking at the feasibilities of combining all the county and the Annapolis Transit as one county-wide transit system and see where we can go. So that is very exciting news that you're working with the county on that.
That's excellent. That would be, that's potentially quite important. All right. Anything else before we adjourn? Seeing nothing, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, folks, for
A motion to
participating
adjourn?
tonight.
Seconded.
And all in favor?
Seconded.
Thank you, one and all, and we'll